Welcome once again to Everyday Holiness, a Faith ND podcast brought to you by the Notre Dame Alumni Association. This is again your host, Dan Allen, Associate Director of Spirituality and Service, and I'm pleased to have you with us, whether it's your first time listening or you're a many-time listener. I'm also pleased to be joined today by Laura Kelly Fanucci. Laura is a 2003 graduate of Notre Dame with her BA in French and Art History, and has gone on to do lots of things, probably best known as an author and a speaker. But we're going to get into the whole of her life and many facets of her vocation. So Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Great. I'm glad to speak with you today. We like to start at people's childhoods and their backgrounds. So if you could give us some sense of your early years, where you grew up, and some highlights there.
Yeah, so I am the middle of 5 children. Grew up in an Irish Catholic family in Michigan, right outside of Flint. So went to Catholic school my whole life. And yeah, just raised in a good old Notre Dame family too. My brother went to Notre Dame, my dad, grandparents, uncles, the whole thing. So yeah, a family with deep faith and lots of love, lots of laughter. Yeah, I had a really wonderful, I think that in many ways planted all the seeds for where I am today.
Yeah, it's good to look back on that foundation, and I think you're even more grateful for it as you look back on the gift that it was. What important moments of faith do you remember there that really shaped you to say, this is more than a hobby, this is more than a particular interest, but this is really foundational to my family and our existence?
Well, when I was 10 years old, my oldest brother died of cancer. He was the brother that went to Notre Dame, and so he never actually graduated. Had Ewing sarcoma, which is a really rare bone cancer, so was sick for 2 years and ultimately died from cancer. And so obviously that was a very foundational experience for me as a child, as a young person, to see someone in my life who was full of faith, who was so beloved by many, had people around the world praying for him. But to watch him suffer and die, I think made me wrestle with a lot of questions around God and faith and what this life is about at a very young age. And so I think it set me on a course to be someone who is unwilling or is unafraid to wrestle with God and unwilling to be satisfied with easy answers. So I think growing up into a faith that had space for my grief, had space to try to grapple with the problem of suffering, all of that was really important to me. And I think as I went to Catholic high school, as I ultimately decided to go to Notre Dame, I think step by step, I became more interested in faith and more compelled by its questions. And yeah, I always chuckle to myself when I look at that French and art history major in my bio, because I'm certainly not doing anything with that today. But I think I really fell in love with the humanities as a way to explore our deepest questions and to understand how humans are making sense of life. And so by the time I was nearing the end of my years at Notre Dame, I kept laughing to friends like, I just want to go back and get a theology degree now. But I let, that awakening to faith take its course, and I did ultimately get a degree in theology. But I think, that experience of losing my brother, I think, shaped my faith more than anything else, because my faith grew up right alongside grief. And I never would have planned that, nor would I suggest that to anyone as a way to embrace your faith as your own. But I think, I have been trying for a long time to figure out what this world is about and who is God and who are we within it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you wouldn't wish that suffering again on anybody, on your own life. But when it happens, it kind of fast forwards the questions that I think we all eventually encounter in life. But you were experiencing them very acutely as a child. Was your brother, was he a student here? And do you remember the response of the Notre Dame family during his illness and after his death?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was a student. He was diagnosed after his freshman year, and then he died during the summer after his junior year. So he was a Soren guy. I was in Walsh, so I always kind of liked that we would have been right next door to each other. But the Notre Dame family did what the Notre Dame family does, which is show up in unbelievable ways. His friends in Soren and Baden were at our house so much I kind of thought they lived closer to us. I don't think I realized as a kid how far Notre Dame actually was from our house in Michigan because they were there all the time. They just supported him in such incredible ways. Monk was still living in Soren then, and Monk did his funeral, and they had a huge contingency of Notre Dame folk who came to the funeral in Michigan, and then there was a mass at the Basilica as well. So I think those friends have, again, done what ND friends do. They've stayed close to our family, close to my parents. I think as a teenager, I did that thing that teenagers often do where I was like, I got to find my own way in the world. I'm not going to Notre Dame. Everybody in my family did that.
Too familiar.
Right. And then I came and stayed on campus by myself with a student I didn't know, and I loved it. And I thought, oh, maybe there's a lot more here than I had given it credit for. So I think that seeing how the Notre Dame family embraced my family, like that was so compelling that once I could own that on my own, I thought, yeah, how could I want to be anywhere else but there? So yeah, that was a really huge gift, both to him in his sickness and to our family still to this day. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've seen that happen time after time over the years, unfortunately, often in the face of tragedy, but it's heartening to know that the Notre Dame family responds in that way. And I think it is the power of the relationships here that is ultimately what is so sustaining about this place. So you talked some about the struggle. Do I want to light my own path? Do I want to come here? Ultimately, you came here. Give us a little bit more about that discernment and what you ended up feeling like once you arrived. Were you able to make the place your own and some of those things?
Oh, yeah. I loved it right away. Freshman year, by the time fall break came around in October, I remember being so upset that I was going to miss these best friends I'd made in like 6 weeks. And I remember thinking, I'm pretty sure I'm going to know these girls for the rest of my life. And sure enough, they were the bridesmaids in my wedding, like godparents to my kids. It was a place that immediately, I always think I have been blessed in my life to have been in a handful of places where you can just feel the spirit at work. It is alive at Notre Dame as it is in many places around the world. And I think that immediately swept me up. And I loved the place from start to finish. It was an absolutely incredible education, and just becoming part of the community and getting involved in the Center for Social Concerns and campus ministry. I think really it was a place that held my awakening faith in beautiful ways and let me explore that even in ways like outside my major, outside the things I was involved in. So it was incredibly formative for me. And I do just feel so much gratitude to that place. Yeah, for those friends, for my spouse. I mean, it really, it has absolutely shaped me so much.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it gave you a lot. What did you find yourself, the kind of person and interest that you were developing into over those years that you now see traces of that in your life and your work now? What were some of those moments where you kind of understood, okay, these are some of the gifts I've been given, these are some of the talents I have, and I think I might be able to do something with this in the future?
I was a smart kid, like lots of people who end up at Notre Dame are. And so school came pretty easily to me. And sometimes when you are a smart kid, a lot of people will tell you what to do, and they'll tell you that you should go into the field they're in because they love it.
Right.
And so along the way, I had a lot of professors who would say, hey, you've really got a gift for this. You've got such an aptitude for study and scholarship. You should get a PhD. You should teach. You would be so good at this. And so I started to think, hey, I love school. I could go to school for the rest of my life. Sounds great. Sign me up. But, along the way, I started doing, I did some immersion service trips with the Center for Social Concerns, and I started squeezing any extra theology courses I could take. And I really started to think about, what is God calling me to do with my life? Not just what am I good at or what could I make a successful life around, but what is God asking for me? And so trying to find those places where my gifts and capacity could meet the needs of the world. And I really wasn't sure at the end of my senior year. I was just wrestling a lot with what to do next because I had all these professors and smart people in my head telling me I should just go on to graduate school and get a PhD in French literature. And I loved that idea, but I wasn't convinced. So I decided to do a year of service. And I went to France. I did put the French major to use.
There you go.
Mom and Dad. And I did a year of service with the Sisters of the Assumption in Compiègne, which is about 70 kilometers northeast of Paris. And I worked in a L'Arche home with adults with physical and developmental disabilities. And I worked in a homeless shelter with refugees from North Africa. And that was one of those years that just ruined me for Christ, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just felt like I felt alive. I felt it was really hard. It's hard to be away from home. It's hard to be speaking in another language all the time, even if you did major in it. Yeah, it was exhausting. And that kind of hands-on service day in and day out is very demanding, but it also felt so deeply good. And I felt that convergence of my own capacities and gifts and what the world needed. And so I came back and decided, you know what? I don't have a degree in theology or ministry, but I really do feel like that's what God is calling me toward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was a really formative time as well.
Yeah, and of course there's a sense where we have our own stories, and you had this one marked by your brother's death and that grief. You also had this story of deep faith and finding that, making that your own over the course of your young adult years. But it seems like something like that experience in France, you're all of a sudden encountering the sufferings and the stories and the unbelievable tales of some of these other people from around the world. Did that really start to help you integrate your faith and your story within theirs?
Yeah, I love that word that you just used about integrate, because one of the most formative conversations I ever had about calling and vocation was actually with a professor from Notre Dame. Bless her heart, I will not name her, because when I went to her office as an angsty senior and said, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. I feel like this faith is really alive in me. I feel like God is calling me to this. But, I've done all this academic study and maybe I'm supposed to go on with that. And I knew she was a person of faith and she was a professor at Notre Dame. So I thought, here's someone who could help me figure that out. And without skipping a beat, she said to me, will you just learn to compartmentalize your life? That's what I do. I'm a Christian, but, I do this other work during the week and you just learn to compartmentalize.
Wow.
And I mean, I had to work to not show what I was feeling on my face because I left her office that day thinking, I want the opposite of that life. I want a life that feels integrated. I want a life that is lived fully for God and for others. Like, I am not willing to compartmentalize what I do on Sunday morning and then the rest of my life. It just felt so backwards. So yeah, when I did get the chance to go and to be immersed in the work of service, in the lives, like you said, of those who were facing such suffering. I think still about the mothers and the children who were in that shelter.
Yeah.
And I wonder where they are now, because the struggles they were facing, when you're talking about refugees from North Africa, like, it's a level of suffering I will likely never face. But, the love they showed to their children and their desire to make a better life for themselves in another country, and the community they would even kind of form there in the shelter with the folks that were there now. That really opened my eyes to what the world was about. And likewise, to be in a L'Arche home where you were involved in the very daily, very bodily task of, adults who cannot care for themselves in the way that many of us can. That was a wonderful wake-up call to a 22-year-old who thought she knew a whole lot about the world and had had a lot of things go her way. And to have to do the laundry every day for that whole house of adults, some of whom, diapering was a part of their life. So it was just very bodily, dirty work. And I think it put me in my right place, as I think it can really only be a blessing when you are at that tender age of 22. Yeah, so I came back from all of that thinking, the world is full of a lot more suffering than I have known, and the world is full of such goodness and tenderness and compassion and these beautiful encounters you'd have with folks one-on-one, which is a life of service. That was what mattered, not any big lofty thing that I thought I was going to accomplish by doing a year of service. It was like these small moments that I had with folks. I learned so much. I don't know that they learned anything from me. It was a year in which I feel like I received so much.
And to me, it's like that's the encounter with Christ in the gritty, in the mundane, in the not so glorious, humble moments. You get to know God in a way that you don't otherwise. Even in lofty moments of Mass and liturgy, those have their place, but in those moments of humility, you really get to know God in a new way.
That's it. I mean, I remember there was one woman in the L'Arche house that I took special care of, and I remember she got this awful rash that needed cream put on it every day. And that's not something, I mean, I'm a parent of many kids now. I don't even want to deal with that with my own beloved children, but I remember how vulnerable and intimate it was. And I felt like it was such an act of love for her to even let me care for her in that way. Like, she didn't know me from Adam 2 months before. And here it was that this stranger was going to be helping her and her body to heal in this very intimate way. And I just remember thinking, this is how Jesus came to serve. Like, this is how he cared for people's bodies. And he let people care for his body, you know, like to anoint him and his head, his feet. There's such incredible, there's something so sacred in that kind of encounter where it's just human to human. Somehow in those moments, I think we find more of the divine. That's part of the mystery, right?
Yeah. The washing of the feet, the acceptance of help, the offer of help, having the courage to go beyond what's comfortable for us and help others. Were those the kinds of things that led you to, I need to study this more, I need to develop more theology to go on to your master's degree?
Yeah, I came back and I just thought, I just want to do this kind of ministry work my whole life. I just loved it. I knew there was no money in it. I knew I was sort of, quote unquote, throwing away a degree I just spent 4 years getting. But I was just very clear that that was where God was calling me. At the same time, I didn't have a degree or a ton of experience in it. So I remember I applied to a bunch of church jobs and nonprofit jobs when I came back. And everybody was like, you don't have any experience, right? you got to do a little bit more with your life here. So I ended up taking a job for a couple of years with a French-American organization that did exchange programs with high school kids, which was really cool to get to use my French in that way with a culture I loved. But I started taking theology classes in the evenings because I was still so into it. So I knew there was this nudge that I couldn't stay even in a really great job. Yeah, and I decided, okay, I just want to jump in. And as someone who loves to learn and loves school, if this is really what I want to orient my whole life toward, I want to get a degree in it. So I decided to go back to school at St. John's and to get a Master of Divinity. Because again, I loved how it wasn't just this esoteric academic theology, but it was really grounded. It was practical and pastoral. And I felt like, yeah, that was where I had felt myself come alive. And I felt like, oh my gosh, the world needs good ministry at every turn, right? So it felt like that was really clearly where God was leading me next.
Yeah, and that is the kind of degree that you can do a lot with it and go in a lot of different directions. So as you were working your way through that, where did you find God calling you in terms of how you were going to apply what you were learning there?
I really came to love two different areas of theology and ministry. One was young adult ministry. I just had, as many young adults do, a real passion for how do you bring the faith alive for young people and make a place for them in the church. But I also really fell in love with Catholic social teaching and felt like that was so incredible to get the chance to read that body of teachings from the church and to immerse myself in what the church had taught about how we are to be in the world and how we are to work towards justice and peace for all of God's people. So I thought about going in either of those directions. I actually got to do a really cool project where I sort of was trying to combine them and talk about how Catholic social teaching was really something that I think a lot of young people are drawn to when they learn about that part of the church. But at the same time, I had gotten married right before I started graduate school, and we were hoping to start a family. And so by the time I graduated, I looked about 100 months pregnant, but was quite pregnant and was really angsting about, oh my gosh, how am I going to interview for a job? I mean, I know legally they can't not give me a job because I'm pregnant, but everybody knows this woman's going to be on maternity leave soon. And one of my professors there actually approached me about doing some part-time work with her that I could do from home on a new theological research project she was doing. So I always try to make myself remember that experience because there are so many times where I am just angsting so much about, God, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to make this work? Me. How am I going to do it? And then this opportunity literally fell into my very pregnant lap and was a reminder that if God wants something to happen, the door will open, the way will open in ways we don't expect. But yeah, it turned out that I actually probably didn't need to waste all of that time worrying and maybe more time trusting that God was
Yeah, it's hard though, and to just have a disposition of openness to God's will and let that play out. You mentioned meeting your husband at Notre Dame. Give us a little bit about your history with him and your mutual calling to marriage.
Yeah, so we actually have tracked it back to realize that we met at freshman orientation. However, it was pretty funny. We were in some scavenger hunt, where they would pair up the men's and women's dorms.
Right.
And my new friend that I was hanging out with, who is now one of my best friends on this earth, she and I mostly spent that whole scavenger hunt making fun of the two guys from Carroll who we thought we were so weird, which turns out one of them was my future spouse. Yeah, but we knew each other and were friends and had a lot of mutual friends, but didn't start dating till the end of senior year, actually. So we were long distance for like a year after graduation and really were discerning from afar if this was going to be our person. And so we wrote letters to each other every day, which now just seems so archaic, but we'd go and mail these letters and it was so romantic. Yeah, but it was really during that year apart that we discerned that we wanted this for each other and wanted to build this life together. So when I moved back to the U.S., I actually moved to Minnesota, where my husband is from. And then we got engaged about a year and a half later. So we laugh because we were in Notre Dame in the same class and had so many overlapping friends and things, but we had really our own Notre Dame experience. We were not met and started dating at freshman orientation. Like we had very different times there. But yeah, it's really beautiful to be able to share that and to know that that shared faith was the foundation of our relationship together, sustained us during that year apart, and then really brought us back together to say, yeah, this is the person that I want to spend my life with, and this is the calling that I really feel like God is bringing us together. So,
And what's his name in case Notre Dame people
Sure, so his name's Franco, a very easy one to remember.
Franco, okay, great.
Franco, yep, and he was a mechanical engineer at Notre Dame. So again, we laughed that I think together we have one full human brain that gets used. Like it's like right and left brain, we really operate differently.
That's good.
Those engineers are a whole world unto themselves.
Yes, complementary in that way.
That's it. Amen.
So you get married and then the decision to start having children. What was that like, and what were some of the trials during that time in your life?
When we first started, we went through the marriage formation and we went through natural family planning. And so when we got married, I was kind of thinking, I want to get this degree and let's wait a while to have kids. But it turned out pretty early on, we could see from the charts we were keeping with our NFP teacher that I had a lot of hormone imbalances and things that were showing up there. And so it actually took us several years to get pregnant. So we definitely went through this time of infertility, of not knowing, will we be able to have kids biologically? Will we adopt kids? Like, what will this look like? Because we really felt called to parenthood.
Yeah.
But it certainly didn't come easy for us. So we were really grateful that after several years, I was able to get pregnant. And that felt just incredible when you really have gone through that trial of thinking, gosh, all the things that we're trying are not working. So to have that be an experience that did come to us still seems miraculous. All the days that things are driving me crazy a little bit here with all these kids, I still think, oh God, I'm so glad that we got to have that we got to have the family that we hoped for. Mm-hmm. So it was certainly parenting and family life brought many trials our way. We had 2 kids, which was just felt like, oh my gosh, the fact that we were able to conceive again and have another baby after our first felt equally miraculous. And then after our second baby was born, I had a miscarriage with our third child. And when you've gone through infertility, you really think you've front-loaded your suffering. You've gone through it. Okay, God, we have done. We have done the hard thing, and we have had the moments of just thinking, what are you doing, God? Why would you put this desire in our hearts and not fulfill it? So we sort of thought, oh, we've crossed that bridge, and now here we are in the world of having kids. And so, miscarriage was just really shocking and really difficult. And as often happens with those kinds of sufferings, the stories just came out of the woodwork afterward from all these women, all these couples in our lives who had experienced loss in that way. But I just had no idea of the depth of the grief that would bring. And it really was a cross that shaped our love and our family and our faith in a very profound way. And in some ways, to have gone through these different kinds of losses of infertility, which is its own kind of grief and loss, and then to go through miscarriage, I think again is that experience of as you are growing up and growing into faith, you realize how much more suffering and pain there is in the world than you maybe thought as a child who just is in their own world and here are the hard things in my family or my town, but you don't appreciate all that folks are going through under the surface. And so those experiences really shaped our family life in a profound way.
And where did you find God in those times? I mean, sometimes God can feel very distant in those moments. Other times God can feel right there with you. What was your and your husband's experience of God during those days?
When I look back on those days of infertility, I remember feeling, I would even have this image in prayer. I had been pounding at this door that I wanted to open, and I couldn't open this door. I could not get to the other side, to that room that would bring a baby, that would lead us into this parenting stage of life. I just felt like I was banging on a door that wouldn't open, and finally I was just leaning my head against the door, just weeping, like I couldn't open it. And I finally came to realize that God's head was leaning right on the other side of that door. And it really reoriented me to what that suffering was. It was not God withholding a good thing. It was not God saying no to us. It was God with us in that suffering. And I think we have this desire to have answers, to make God fit our human rationality. And we have really poor theology because we think if we just plug in the right prayers, God will output what we want, like a vending machine. And I think it's so much more mysterious than that, the presence and the workings of God in our life. But I have felt in the deepest griefs and sorrows of my life this presence of God with us. I mean, it's like the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, right? In Psalm 34. That is so true. And I really sometimes wish it were the opposite. I wish it were like God is close to the people having a great day. You're just on it, you're in it, you're loving it, and look, God's right there because this is what God wants.
Yeah.
But instead, I have found that when my heart is the most broken, God is the closest. And so I think I look back on, because our life has gone through some very hard times since the beginnings of our family, and yet I think, okay, maybe in some ways God was preparing me to keep searching and finding for God within the suffering. Like that was not aside from whatever my experience of God was. It was just immersed within it.
Yeah, that it is a mystery that we can only sometimes scratch the surface at. It's sometimes something that you have to return to. You can't fully understand it in the grips of the suffering. Over time, you come back to it, and only maybe later in life or maybe even in eternal life will some of the profound griefs and sufferings that we've been through make a little bit more sense in this grander story. But I think in the midst of it, it's just so hard that it's hard to see past it.
Absolutely. after we lost that baby to miscarriage, we were able to go on and have another child. And I remember thinking, people really wanted to just kind of make that all about, oh, look at what a beautiful story God wrote out of that suffering. Like, you had this next baby, and people wanted to make it like, didn't that make everything okay?
Like a replacement or something.
Totally a replacement. You got the baby you wanted. And I had such a deep resistance to that, because it was like, I want this baby and I want that other child, like that unique, unrepeatable soul. That is always going to be a child I never got to hold. And there are no replacements. I often think like we are given an expansive heart and we are given two hands to be able to hold a lot in this life. And when we try to reduce it to just everything happens for a reason and every cloud has a silver lining, that is not the way that our faith actually works, or that God's ways operate in the world. So I just think we want to reduce these mysteries of life to math. And we want to say, can we make this add up? If you have lost and then you gained, well, doesn't that just net out? Like everything's fine. But it doesn't. That isn't how loss works, and it's not how love works. And it's certainly, I think that if you are willing to enter into the depths of what grief and loss can teach you, I think you learn profound things about love and about God that I have not been able to learn other ways. So I think it's, if we can look at the reality of suffering as a fact, it's going to touch each of our lives in some way. But if we're always just fearing it and resisting it and think it will break us and think that we don't even want to talk about it or think about it, we will lose so much of what is to be found within it. Because I do think that truth of God's presence within the painful parts of life is just undeniable.
Yeah, as I said, there's a knowledge and understanding of God that we receive in those depths that we couldn't find otherwise. And that obviously led you to write. And a lot of your authorship has been about these topics. How did that come about, in the sense of you wanted to share some of the insights from some of these very difficult days and years?
Yeah, I always laugh that I became a writer because I was this stressed out new mom who could not keep it together.
Let's add a book on top of that.
Totally. If I had found motherhood to be easy, I don't think I would have become a writer, because that was at the height of the blogging days, you know? So people would start these blogs and just share about their experiences. And I was really struggling. I think new parenthood can just throw you for a loop no matter what. But I was also struggling with having been immersed in theological studies for 3 years full time. And then right when that ended, all of a sudden I had this newborn. And it was like, I was trying to balance work and parenting and all of that, but I really was struggling. And I wanted to work through, where was I finding God in this new calling? Like, I thought I was going to be doing just this work of theology and ministry, and that was going to be my life. And I guess I sort of thought parenting would be part of it, but I don't know. Did I think it was like a side gig? I don't know, truly. I think I just didn't think it would be as hard as it was.
Right.
And it was. So I really needed to wrestle with that. And I found writing to be a spiritual practice that really helped me to make sense of how I was feeling. So I started this blog on kind of trying to find God in parenting. So writing about these intersections of theology and family and spirituality, and was really delighted and surprised to find other folks who were interested in that too. And I think along the way, maybe because we had those years of infertility that led into our experience of parenting, I think I felt so alone in infertility. There were very few people in my life who had gone through that. And I felt like, man, if I had had a way to hear other people's stories or to know what others had gone through, how they made it through, that really would have helped. So I think I came into that experience of writing about parenting being willing to share some of the harder stories, because I had felt so hungry for them in the past. So writing about infertility and writing about just the daily struggles of new parenting was not hard for me. I felt like I said, going back to those very vulnerable and beautiful encounters of service, like there's a way in which I think God is present to us in vulnerability. When Jesus becomes human, like that's the most vulnerable experience there is. He's going to get hurt and cry. And I mean, the passion in his death, he just accepts this full embodiment of what it is to be human. And so it felt like that could be holy to share that, to work through that with others. So when I went through miscarriage, that was something that I was willing to write about. And then actually a couple of years after that, we learned that we were expecting again and found out that we were having twins, which was very shocking.
Yeah.
And we learned about halfway through the pregnancy that they had developed a rare complication of identical twins called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome.
Oh.
And so they were very sick, and I had to have surgery in utero to try to sever. They had connected blood vessels in the placenta, and so one twin was not getting enough blood and the other was getting too much. And so we had this surgery to try to save them, and the surgery wasn't successful, so they had to be born very prematurely. It was 24 weeks, and they were born via C-section, and they were very sick. And so they went to the NICU, but the complication was so far that it was very clear they weren't going to make it. So our daughter Maggie lived 1 day, and our daughter Abby lived 2 days.
Gosh.
And to have had the experience of writing through processing painful parts of my life, to have been someone who grew up with faith kind of growing alongside grief, all of that in some ways I feel like, I don't even want to use the word prepared. I don't think you can be prepared, but I think all of that was what I brought into that experience of just devastating loss, because there is nothing that can prepare you for holding a baby as they die. There just isn't any way to prepare someone for that. And yet we had this incredible experience, my husband and I, when we were in the NICU with our second daughter, Abby, and we were holding her like skin to skin, like you do with newborn babies. And we both experienced this incredible joy, which is not at all what you expect when you are in the NICU that day, knowing what's coming. But it was unbelievable. Like, it was so far beyond anything I had ever felt before or have felt since. So I wish all the time I could feel it again. But so I think before in my experiences of grief and loss, I had found God in the pain and in the consolation. And this was like next level. Like this was God in this deep joy that surpassed all understanding. And it wasn't even like it was a flash. It was like hours. And I could see it on my husband's face, like he was experiencing it too. And the nurses came in, and this nurse who'd worked in the NICU for 30 years was like, I've never seen anything like what's happening with you right now.
Wow. Like a foretaste of heaven almost.
I mean, if it always feels audacious to say that, I'm always like, so we always call it the joy, because that was the word that just felt like the truest when we were in it.
Yeah.
But it changed, as much as their deaths changed everything for us, because it was such an intense grief to lose a baby like that. Like, that experience of joy also changed everything. And to share that with another person is wild, because I think sometimes I'll second guess, like, what really happened? That, did that really happen?
So
was that? I want to
right.
cross-examine it.
Yeah.
Like, if that was really heaven, then. But to have known that my spouse went through it, and the way he talks about it, and the way his face will change when he talks about it too, I just think, I don't know, it's not the miracle. We wanted the other miracle, right? Where like the NICU and the doctors and all the modern medicine miracles save our babies, and then they go on to be like co-valedictorians. You know what I mean? Exactly. Like, that's the miracle I would have ordered up. But we didn't get that, and yet we got this other thing. And I don't know, I just think if that's what heaven is, which I'm pretty sure it is, I will do anything to get there again. Yeah. I would do anything just to be in that space. Like, it was, there was no sadness. I couldn't even feel sad about how Maggie died. Like, it just wasn't there. So, I don't know.
I mean, I've never gone through anything that profoundly difficult in my own life, but I do, on this podcast, in my own life, I do think there are glimpses of heaven that God gives us. At Mass, the veil between heaven and earth is very thin. And at moments of life and death, you hear these stories. And sometimes I think it's almost unfathomable to me to think, how could you even get through something like that? But then I think these moments of God knows just what we need, just enough. It's like, we're not in heaven yet. We can't be there. We can't be there with our loved ones, but just enough to keep us going. And I do think there are stories like that help us through unimaginable suffering and difficulty.
Yeah, I think in the years since they died, my husband and I went on to write a book about miscarriage and loss for couples because we felt like there was nothing good out there for dads. And so we really wanted to have a good resource for them. And I've gone on to speak churches and retreats and conferences and share that story. And what's interesting is I'll hear two kinds of stories afterward when people want to come up and chat. I'll hear people who say, I didn't get anything like that. You know, I went through something really similar, or I went through something really hard, and I didn't get anything like that. And that is true too. And I didn't have that when I miscarried. I didn't have that at other times in my life. So that's really true too. It's not that someone doesn't have deep faith. It's not that God is not loving them and providing for them in other ways.
Yep.
We don't all get the same things, and I can't make sense of that either. But I will also have people who come up and say, I know exactly what you're talking about. I had this flash of joy when I was like at the cemetery right after we buried my mom, or in the hospital room. And it was, like you said, it was like golden. It was, everything was just full of this indescribable joy. I knew everything was going to be okay. And it was just a flash. And so I think, I don't know, I think in our church and in our culture, we don't talk about the hard things enough. We don't talk about suffering. We don't talk about death and grief. So people are left to grapple with this on their own. We haven't given people good language to talk about their experiences of God. So people second guess it and think, well, I don't know what that was. Well, that was really holy and beautiful. And it goes beyond categories, but it's real. And I think at the same time, if we're not willing to talk about the really hard and devastating parts of it, then people are left thinking like they did something wrong, or they didn't pray to the right saints, or, you know, all of these things that can creep into our grief if we're not exposing it to the air and letting it breathe and letting people seek healing. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be done. The Catholic Church has such a beautiful theology around suffering. And I've had non-Catholic friends say, they're really jealous of that. They're like, your church will talk about it. You have this beautiful theology of suffering. But I do think we need to be unafraid to talk about that as a church, to talk about heaven, to talk about what it is to grieve. You know, all of that, what it really means, eternal life. I mean, I just think we have a lot of work to do. It's really important for folks.
Well, and it's clear to me that you found your vocation, part of your vocation, taking up the mantle of that work, of doing that through your writing. Has it been surprising to you as this has taken off and connected and become a career, really, to be sharing these messages with people? Did you ever foresee that for yourself?
No, not at all. And I would never have signed up. I would have chosen the easy road if I could have gotten it. But I think it's such a beautiful, I think resurrection is such a reality in our life. It is not just this thing that happened once 2,000 years ago in a garden in an empty tomb. There's this way that God's movement is always to bring life out of death. And I just see this over and over in my life, that there are these experiences of death and grief or suffering. And God's way is to say nothing is lost. It's changed and it's not going to look the way you wanted, but it isn't lost. And so I do think, gosh, I would not have signed up to be the girl who writes on death and suffering and grief. And yet it has been the honor of my life to be able to do this work, to tell these stories, to speak to people when they're in deep suffering and pain, to help them to feel less alone, to let them know they are still beloved by God. That is the ministry of my life. And I could not have foreseen that. But I do think it continues to be the movement of how God works. I mean, 2 years ago, I got diagnosed with cancer, and I was like, you have absolutely got to be kidding me, God. Like, I have, like, my dance card is full. Yeah. I am full up on suffering. You got to be kidding me. I've done this, and I've done this for you. And how could you let this happen to me? And yet, here is God again, showing up in these places of suffering and pain and loss and working through them. And so, I don't know, every time I'm cancer-free now, but every time I walk into that cancer clinic, I think, these are the people Jesus loves. These people are in pain. They are bald. They have lost limbs. They look a mess. Nobody in the outside world wants to admit that this is going on inside. And these are the people that Christ just got so close to and would not leave. And I think, well, that's how God works then, isn't it? Like, we think that life is about these big, shiny things and the successes and the smoothness. And it's like, here's life rock bottoming again, and all the uncertainty and fear is there. And the holy is just like thick in that place. You can just feel it, you know? So I don't know. It's
sometimes when we're stripped away from the distractions of our life, our possessions, our relative wealth, especially compared to the rest of the world and human history, our relatively good health and longevity compared to most of human history, it can be easy to forget about that we are truly reliant on and trusting in God. And it seems to me that in those moments where those things are stripped away, that we reconnect with that again.
Oh, that's it. I mean, I felt that so much. Going through cancer, it was like, okay, I thought I had shaped a life in service to God. I thought I was trying to be a decent person, and I thought I was trying to live out my faith and deepen my awareness of what God wants. And yet, like, when I got diagnosed, it's like all these scales just fall from your eyes. And I just realized, you realize with such clarity what matters and what doesn't. I was like, I just want to be here for my kids. There's 1,000 things on any other day I would tell you. I'd love to do that professionally. I'd love to do that personally, blah, blah, blah. All of that fell away. And I was like, this family, these people I love, this is what life is about. So if nothing else matters, it's just them. And life suddenly gets very clear very quickly. Yeah. And so I do think that like you said, we have, relatively speaking, we have more than like nearly every human in history has had. And look at us still, and I'm raising my hand here, like unhappy, worried, angsty, all the things, wanting more. And yet we have been cared for with such abundance. And when life gets stripped down to the basics, it's like, oh, yeah, you know what? A lot of those things were not needs. They were just wants. And were they even truly wants or just distractions or just like the evil one gets under our skin pretty easily, you know? Yeah, but the basics of life, to love the ones we've been given, that's it. Yeah. And you have been blessed with additional beautiful children. Tell us about some of the joys. 5 boys. They keep this house very full, very busy. They're just the absolute dream. I adore them. Each one is so different. The house is very loud and messy, and it is exactly what I prayed for. Yeah. Yeah. And when you have some of those moments, the late summer sunset, or seeing your kids have success in their sports or activities or something, do you find that it's sweeter given all that you've gone through? Oh, yeah. I have this amazing theologian friend that I got to work with as part of that work I did after my graduation. And she would talk about how the cross and the suffering we go through sweetens and deepens our vocations. And on the surface, we kind of want to recoil from that. Like, how could the cross sweeten anything? But as hard as life can get, and we're living through really hard times, I still will look at my kids, or I will, like you said, that sunset moment at the end of the day, I will just be overwhelmed with gratitude to get to be here, to get to be alive still, to get to do good work that God's called me to do, and to love and serve my family. There's such overwhelming joy and gratitude in that. And somehow I think, dang, if that cross of cancer didn't sweeten and deepen this calling. Again, I wish it were just like, remember all those great days I had. That really affirmed that I was called to be a mom. Instead, it was like, those times where I thought, am I going to get to stay here for them? Am I going to get to survive this? I don't know. It can go many different ways. But yeah, I'm just overwhelmed with joy and gratitude at what God has done in my life. And just the real gift that life is, truly.
Well, and I think it might be surprising for people to hear, just even just sitting here listening to, thinking like, oh my gosh, how many more things, Lord? Give her a break.
Yeah, I really better be done. Let me go on the record right now as saying, I'm full up, Lord. I'll be happy to write about all this for the rest of my days,
Plenty
but
of
please
material,
no more.
Plenty of material. Have people marveled at that with you? And what is your message to people when they sort of are reliving some of your hardest moments?
Yeah, I do think people will be surprised that I can laugh about it. They'll be like, how do you have such a sense of humor about all of this? Well, have you met an Irish Catholic? First of all, we have a dark sense of humor.
Right.
So yes, that's always been a coping strategy. But I also think I have seen such marvels at what happens when we let the hard thing come out of our body and out of our mouths and we say it out loud and someone else says, oh, me too. I thought I was the only one that felt like that.
Yep.
I thought that was like, I didn't know what to do. I was absolutely broken and the loneliness made it all the worse. And every time that I tell the story or write something that is sharing a really hard part of my life, there are responses like that. Like people are just hungry to be seen and heard in their own struggles. And so, yeah, I do think that God has given me a gift of resilience or a sense of humor or an ability to write about it. Yeah, but I also think I have been fed and cared for and nurtured by so many people who have shared their hard things with me and then said how they found God through that or how they were able to survive the thing they thought they couldn't survive. And so I do think there is this incredible capacity that we have as humans for survival, for resilience, for being able to build something out of the ashes. And yeah, so I think that every time I have seen that happen, it has both nourished me and nourished others. And that to me is, well, that's the work of God. So yeah, as hard as it is, I keep showing up to it and it keeps my head above water too. You know, I mean, it is, I have none of this figured out. There are days I wake up so mad that my daughters are gone. There are days I wake up with so much fear, like, is the cancer going to come back? Is it going to kill me? I am always wrestling with this. So I think that work of trying to put it into words and share it with others brings me just as much life and hope as it does to anybody else, you know?
And it's certainly true that God sends others into our lives to suffer with us, to show us the way in terms of the saints in heaven and others. So who have been some of your models of holiness, whether already in heaven or part of your life, who have really helped you along your way?
You know what's funny? When you were asking that question, I realized I have a totally different answer than I probably would have if you'd asked me 5 minutes earlier.
Okay.
Because I think I probably would have said, I would have started naming my favorites, right? I would have said Dorothy Day and Oscar Romero and these incredible, clear-eyed visionaries, these prophets that have showed us how to see the brokenness in the world, how to sit with people in their pain, how to just call others to this work of compassion. Like, they have shaped my life so much. And I have such a space for, like, I just have a deep desire to be like those kinds of holy men and women who just, they have a fire lit in them and they are unwilling to turn it down. But as you were speaking, I suddenly got a flash of a dear friend who helped me a lot through my early diagnosis. And Rachel's a part of the Notre Dame community. She went to St. Mary's and she and I connected through Mothering Spirit, which is a website I run on spirituality and parenting. It's what my blog kind of grew into. And now it's a place where many other women come and write about their experiences of motherhood. And Rachel and I connected through that. And she had done some writing about what it was like to be mothering her 4 children through stage 4 cancer. And just an incredible writer, an incredible mother. And Rachel and I only got to meet twice on this earth, had a lot of texts and a lot of emails. And when I think about someone who lives out the kind of holiness that I hope my life will embody, Rachel would be one of those people, because cancer took her life and she knew that was coming at the end. And you would have thought she had every reason in the world to be angry. And as her life was coming to a close, I was just getting diagnosed and I was reeling through all the tests, and she was like praying for me, which I kept thinking, Rachel, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for more time for you. But she walked me through those early months in a way that nobody else could, because she had been down that same road of suffering and just had such a deep faith and such a love for God and a trust that somehow God was going to make things okay, even if her healing didn't come in this life. And so when I think about holiness and someone who's able to just shine, she just shone. And anybody who knew her would say that, because her faith wasn't daunted by all the suffering that she had. She was not Pollyanna-ish. She could look right at it, but she trusted in God and knew that God was good. And seeing someone hold on to that all the way to the end, an end that came way too soon, and an end that was hard, that was amazing. Like, she still shines for me. And I think so much of what I love and admired about my brother was that same kind of holiness. These people that can really just shine with faith, even as they are suffering. Yeah, it's incredible. It's such a gift to have people like that in our life. They're really rare. They're such a gem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm grateful. We need like the capital S saints. We need these big beacons of light, but then these people in our own lives, those small S saints that just shine, like I think they make holiness something we could actually walk toward. It's not just 6 feet above the ground. It's right here where we are.
Well, and that's so well articulated, and why I think I so enjoy making this podcast is I get to hear stories like that all the time, and I always take little things from these conversations. Oh, I got to do that. I got to apply that to my life, So it's selfish in a way, but I really appreciate the chance to share some of these stories. So as a final question, something I always ask every guest is, what are some of the techniques and methods and practices that have been helpful for you in striving after a holy existence?
Ooh, what a great question. I'd say 3 come to mind really quickly. The first is the Eucharist. Like, I just think to show up at least once a week and be fed by God, and to be in the community of the body of Christ, like this whole ragtag band of saints and sinners. And we just show up and we're like, some people are just looking like they're having the beatific vision. And then some of these kids are like, I want to be anywhere else but here. And God just loves us all. Like, it's my favorite thing to watch people receive communion. So not only to receive the Eucharist myself, but to watch other people just blows my mind. It's one of my favorite practices. And the second, I think, would be to try to notice the daily joys and gratitudes. I really am a person who does get kind of overwhelmed by despair and everything that's broken in the world. And I think when you're looking at the world with eyes of faith, it can be really easy to do that. But I do try to really notice the joys and the gratitudes, and just, I don't have any kind of like formal practice around it, but just when those moments are happening, to take that half step or that half second to stop and thank God for it and just relish that joy or that gratitude. It really does reorient you toward the beautiful, the true, and the good. And I think that's how we get through. And the last I would say is Scripture. I love Scripture so much. And I do have a long practice for years and years of Lectio Divina, which is this really slow, contemplative way to pray with Scripture, just to read a little bit of it each day and to try to see what word or phrase God is speaking to you through those words. Obviously, as a writer, I love words and could swim in them all day, but I think that practice of Lectio Divina has become one of the real foundations of my life. And so often in my work of ministry, I'll hear people say, I just wish God would show me the way, and I just wish God would speak to me. And I'm always like, it's in a book. We have a whole book. We have a whole book. It's hard to read sometimes. You got to get into it. But so many words are there, and so many gems and beauties and words of comfort and encouragement and love are there. And so to make it a daily practice to let those words be what are in our minds and on our lips, I think that's been really formative for me too. So yeah, that's what I would offer. It's a great
thank you. Thank you for offering those pieces of advice and practices to us. And thank you for just taking the time to be so vulnerable and share so many aspects of your story. Early in our conversation, you talked about this desire to integrate your vocation and your life, and you've done that in such a remarkable way. And I think what's really so amazing about it is you've also integrated even the darkest hours into your life and your story, and yet have come through with a message of hope. So I'm certain that has come through in our conversation. I can't wait to share it with our audience. So thanks for taking the time to be with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. This was really wonderful. It's a gift to be with you.
All right. It was a gift to me as well. Well, that concludes this episode of Everyday Holiness, a Faith Indy podcast. As always, we invite you to like the podcast, to give it a rating, especially if you enjoyed it, to share it with others, especially those who might benefit from it, to subscribe both to it and to our Faith Indy Daily Gospel Reflection at faith.indy.edu/signup. There you'll receive our daily reflection. Laura's been a writer on that, as well as notifications of new episodes of the podcast. Until next time, thank you for being with us, and you'll be in our prayers. God bless.